tell someone what to do or not to do if you were celibate, would you say suffer?
No.
Or what would you say?
I'm wondering what the Latin is. Maybe somebody knows, but I'm thinking of the French word célibataire, which simply means bachelor.
Bachelor, okay.
It simply means not married.
Not married is one of its definitions, right? But what else? Come on.
Separate.
Separate.
Freely chosen, refraining from sex.
Refraining from sex, exactly. And freely chosen, you could be, I suppose you could not freely choose it.
Well, then
and
you wouldn't say you were celibate.
You would just say you were starved.
You don't call prisoners celibate.
Celibate, good point, okay. All right, so is there anything else we'd like to add to the idea of what is celibacy? Yeah?
But you can be celibate for different reasons. One is because you're going to a higher spiritual cause, and the other is because sexuality is tainted, is evil, and to be avoided. And I think what we've read here is the latter, whereas other asceticism is more for a higher spiritual cause, that we're rising rather than we're avoiding what's evil.
But I think they aren't mutually exclusive. I think it's both are trying together.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
well, did everybody read it as David read it? Did you feel that the Shakers were saying that they were being celibate because sex was evil? Or did you think they were saying be celibate because that is a journey to a higher place? Or did you feel they were saying both? What else?
They were saying it because they had been told in the doctrines that this is the way it was set up, and they had to accept that to go into that community. That's the way I read it.
So it was a ticket to getting in.
It was one was going to conform if one wished to belong to that community, you know. And they had freely chosen it. I think that's freely chosen. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Nobody's saying to them, "You've got to be celibate."
Gotta be celibate, yeah. Next.
What's the relationship of this celibacy to the celibacy of nuns who are actually married to Christ in their doctrine?
Yeah.
I don't know, I have no clue.
We will definitely pick that. We will definitely.
Well, actually, Mother Lee used that expression. Did
Yeah,
not?
she did.
Yes, she did. She
So,
did.
Lee used that expression.
Okay, I just wanted to get the definition out first, and then when I was
Can I
talking with
enhance? Just
you
good.
can enhance, yes.
Say a comment. I think with Shakers and celibacy too, it goes beyond just sexual abstinence, but it's also all kinds of physical affection, expression, touching, caressing, kissing, just hugging each other would be seen as a lustful act or promoting lust, which would be a prohibition against that.
And also self-gratification was out.
Self-gratification is that.
Right, exactly.
I also, just one more thing, that Frederick Evans' piece where he talks quite a lot about virgin purity. And he talks about that being a force so strong that they could govern the country because they were so pure.
Well, I hope we'll get into what the benefits and the drawbacks of Shaker celibacy were, and maybe more. But before I came, I was talking about this to Betsy, and she asked such a good question. She suggested such a good question that I asked her if she would throw it out to us all. So go, Betsy.
Well, I said that if I were teaching this concept in a class, that I would begin with this in this way. I would say, suppose you're on the train to Hudson, and sitting next to you is a person, doesn't matter, male, female, 30, let's say, and they say, where are you going? You say, I'm going to my country house. What about you? They say, the person says, actually, I'm on my way to join a celibate religious community. So, what thoughts would go through your head? So, John, what thoughts would go through your head?
You would say, how nice.
What you would say? What would you be thinking?
What you would be thinking is, there's really, I would not choose to continue this conversation because I don't know that I have much in common with this person. And you'd start to imagine, where did this all come from? Why are they? What led to this decision?
And what would be in your head? What would be your suspicion?
Something wrong happened.
So that this is a product of trauma, or
Of some sort. Yeah.
or psychological disease, or
Yeah.
something. Stephanie, what would go through your head?
Well, I actually think I might ask why, and I'd be curious. And then I would envision that the individual was on or is on some type of journey. I mean, we do know someone who lived a celibate life, and there was a reason for that, and there was a point in time at which I think that person found what he was looking for and was able to move from that. But I do think you go in search of something when you look for that level of purification, and I do see it as a form of purification.
So you would assume, what would you assume about the person then?
That they're on some kind of journey, personal journey.
I don't know if I'd make a particular assumption about that person. I would be intrigued. I would want to know. I would probably ask more. I think if you're on a train, knowing that you're going to get off at some point, you might be a little more daring in conversation.
A lot of movies about that.
And but I think it's a great way to set it up, to put yourself there. And what is this person thinking, and why would they do it?
I think that it would be interesting to me if the single piece of information that I was getting and characterizing where this person was going was a community where she would be, or he would be celibate, without any description other than that. Which
A celibate religious community.
Yeah, but religious could be snake biting to being a chassid.
Okay, so what would be in your head about?
Well, what would be in my head is that this person was seeking a community as a result of this person's feelings about sexuality.
I would be intrigued because I was part of something where there was a celibate community. I used to go to Kupalo.
I was just thinking of Kupalo.
And the people who were initiates were celibate. And the intention was to have all your energy directed toward teaching, toward a life in community without the distractions. So I think it's a very high level, I agree with Stephanie, it's a very high level of commitment to something beyond yourself. There's, I think, a lot of selflessness because and I think that's maybe a little bit why it's hard for us, because in our society we think much more about the self and a little circle, and this view is much greater. I'm just part of something else, and I want to be part of this and enhance it.
So, unlike Herb, you wouldn't see this necessarily as a kind of
no
sexual pathology.
No.
I didn't think
sexual, not pathology, but sexual fear or
But what I'd be interested. What do you think that that celibacy is any more of a selfless act than sexuality?
Because I think that it's very natural. I think that sexuality and forming couples and having children that's actually the thing that's strange about this. Is very natural. It's how the world continues. This is part of the world. So doing this is doing something against the grain, and in my mind there has to be something to understand it. Why do you want to do this?
I think, Herb, you're right, that it can also be sexual. There are strong communities that instead of celibacy advocate open sex. That was the Russianish community where he had principles of totally open sexuality for everybody. That is probably harder to do and maintain over the long run because of natural divisions and subdivisions and jealousies and celibacy.
John, you at the beginning made a little joke about suffering.
Oh.
What would be going through your head?
You could teach it. Well, that was really kind of humor. I actually would be...
Well, that part of the purpose of this exercise is to get the kind of...
I would be very, very intrigued and would want to get into a discussion with this person. I'd want to know, if depending upon their age, that would be a factor, youth and trying to figure their way out. Or if it was someone who was older, I'd find that even more fascinating because it was somebody who maybe has been watching the world a little bit longer. So I would really want to get into a dialogue with that person and learn something from it.
I think the other thing that's interesting too is Kripalu is an example of the 8 limbs of yoga, which incorporate a purification based upon brahmacharya, which is withholding sex. There's an 8-limb path in Buddhism that does the same thing. The Catholic Church obviously had purer orders that required this kind of thing.
Priests are expected.
Exactly. So there's also the sense of there is an institution that has an answer that I'm looking for. It's what Thea was saying. And part of what they're saying is the answer is celibacy. So therefore, in seeking whatever their answer is to life, I'm going to take that step. It's not so much a personal choice of celibacy itself as it is they know the answer and I want to find the answer with them.
I wonder if, Betsy, part of our response to this depends on the tradition we've been brought up in. And I've looked up what the traditions were in various religions. And what would you think, for instance, the Jewish attitude towards celibacy is?
Disapproving.
Yeah, disapproving.
Very hostile.
Hostile.
No, it's not
There was-
hostile.
there
Yes,
was-
it's hostile.
No, there are conditions.
They were all-
There are conditions for celibacy, but
There
they're
were older
limited.
growing Jewish groups, the Essenes were celibate.
That is true. There certainly are instances of celibacy and group celibacy. And I learned that before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, priests and Kohanes and Levites who served the temple were required to abstain from sex before they served and during their service. So that goes back to the idea of this trying to reach a higher plane.
The Essenes were the ones.
And the Essenes, yes, as John said. But this is what the Talmud says about asceticism. Man in the life to come will have to account for every enjoyment offered him that was refused without sufficient cause. So, it's really,
Whom are you quoting there?
this is in the Talmud.
Oh.
So. And what about Hindu? What do you think? It goes to the very thing that you were saying about what brahmacharya.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's from a Swami: the highest of all goals in human life, spiritual attainment, requires the maximum available pranic energy, and that comes through pranachara. So you can't even get to this. And how about, and Buddhism you've mentioned. Islam. What do you think Islam thinks about celibacy?
I think they're against it.
You're right.
It's
It does not. It condemns. It,
condemns
yeah.
it.
It believes marriage enables one to attain the highest form of righteousness within this sacred spiritual bond.
But I think there's a difference between celibacy and how a religion views celibacy versus how a religion views pleasure. And so, for example, just to go back to Judaism, I think that particularly amongst religious observant people, it's about procreation. It's not about pleasure. So I just, this whole notion of celibacy is just very narrow for me. Yes or no is it's just more. Herb, you disagree?
And actually, to add to what you're saying, there among Orthodox Jews, you're only allowed to have sex for a part of the month.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
not.
it's
It's not.
for.
It's not whenever.
It's
you-
for procreation.
But
So
you're commanded to have it.
You're commanded to have it, and
Commanded
you
to
are
have
supposed to
It's one of
enjoy
the-
it.
It's one of the
Yeah,
613 commandments.
I don't think that the Jewish laws relating to when you can have sex, or that the purpose of having sex is merely procreation. I think it's broader than that. There's a guy who's going around New York City now who is an Orthodox rabbi who gives lectures about all of the bells and whistles of sexuality and whether they're permitted or not under Jewish law, and he says they are.
Did you get the sense from the readings about the Shaker's view of marital sex? What was your take on that, or did you get any sense at all?
Well, let me, a little bit.
Yeah.
What I was surprised at is they didn't want closeness even between women. So it wasn't only that they didn't want sex; they didn't want intimacy one-on-one.
Right. I think that's, did everybody get that
Yeah.
Yeah,
impression
it's
too?
communal.
Yeah.
not individual.
Because it detracts from the community.
It became very complicated